When Jesus uses the term enter through the narrow gate today, I bet most of us can kind of viscerally imagine what it feels like to squeeze through one, right? Haven't you ever tried something like squeezing between that table and that wall, or when you're hiking, try to squeeze through that narrow space, or maybe at a stadium event, trying to squeeze through people as you make your way to your chair? Jesus knows that on the journey of life, there are two types of narrow gates for every person. One, there are those narrow gates we freely choose to go through as we try to be good human beings, the ones that Jesus is talking about today. And secondly, there are those narrow gates that we get shoved through. These are the challenges of life that we might not have even seen coming. Tough and painful things. And when life shoves us through those kinds of narrow gates, they often scrape away many really good things on the way. On the journey of life, both types of narrow gates are tough to go through. First, a word about those narrow gates that we freely choose to go through, as we try to be good human beings. This is work that Jesus did himself throughout his life. Jesus chose again and again the crucial work of entering through narrow gates so that he could emerge as a truly alive and free and other-centered person for this world. Now, this is an aside. On one level, I think you and I know that it's worth it to do the hard work of becoming more alive and free human beings. The blessings that come from that inner work needed to enter through those narrow gates. But I also know that it sometimes can be hard to remember that it's worth it and to trust that it is. That's partly why we need community to remind us, to inspire us, to call that forth in us. What I want you to know about me is that one of the things for which I am most truly and profoundly grateful for of everything in my life is how blessed I am to know so many people who do that work, who do the work of entering through narrow gates to be alive and loving, good human beings. So, in case I've not said this before, to all of you who are doing that hard inner work, thank you. To all of you who have been willing to go to a counselor to get help for an addiction, to work on that impulse to anger, to ask for feedback on how to be a better person, thank you. Entering through those narrow gates can be pretty hard sometimes, but haven't you seen a blessing from doing so? To all of you who are kind to that new kid at school, friendly to that clerk, respectful to that person that cuts the grass, cleans the floors. And isn't it a joy to see those people as human beings, right? And I hope that there are folks who do that for you also. To all of you who care for a child with any form of disability, who have welcomed an aging parent or in-law into your home, who make time for the neighbor who struggles, who include that person in your gathering or group that others might think different. Thank you. To all of you who resist that urge to label people, to decide that people are categories, for all the ways you do that difficult and sometimes messy work to expand your thinking and soften your heart to remember that we are one human family. Thank you. To all who enter through the narrow gate and are kind and generous and humble in ways that no one will ever know, who do what you do the way you do it just because it's the right thing to do, because it's the loving thing to do, even when it would be easier not to, and maybe especially when it would be easier not to. Thank you. I hope you are aware of that goodness in you, because every time I see you do any of those things I just mentioned, I see something of God in you. And all of that kind of work of choosing to enter through those narrow gates is an incredible gift when life pushes us through those other narrow gates, that second type. The losses we didn't want, of course, but which visit us. They visit us all, right? Things like a job loss or a bad diagnosis or the death of a loved one or a sick kid or a diminished mental capacity in ourselves or someone we love, a relationship that fell apart, or the many other kinds of letting goes, big and small. When we get visited by those losses, we are so much better equipped to come through on the other side alive and loving and free. Because choosing to enter through that first type of narrow gates, to which Jesus invites us to pass through, those develop in us wisdom, resilience, integrity. And entering through those narrow gates brings joy and meaning and contentment and fulfillment in good times. It does, it really does. And in those tough times, it brings hope and perspective and all those things we need. That brings me to this one specific example of people who chose to enter through a narrow gate and who worked to help bring their kids through that narrow gate with them. I've told some of you this before, and if that's you, please bear with me, because I do believe it makes sense to say today. Bob and Barb Sulan are parishioners here at Most Sacred Heart. Almost 7 years ago now, their daughter was shot to death while shopping at Catholic Supply. It was awful. When the police captured his daughter's murderer 2 days later, Bob told me how relieved he was. He said to me, "Quite honestly, Father Joe, I hope that man never gets out of prison, because if he does, my boys would probably want to kill him. And then I lose my sons as well." And then he added this: "I don't expect them to forgive that man. Instead, I've been working with them to help them transition to something more positive. I don't expect them to forgive that man. I've been working with them to help them transition to something more positive." That is one clear example of what entering through the narrow gate might look like, right? Jesus never said, don't be heartbroken or don't be mad at the losses that life throws at us. But he does say, don't become bitter or vengeful. Yep, there are two kinds of narrow gates. Life would just shove us through that first painful type. But the other ones that we choose for love, those lead to life in good times and in bad. Those lead to life now and at the hour of our death.